The sound of a heavy boot striking human ribs echoed through the silent courtroom like a gunshot. Officer Brock Halloway stood over the defendant, a smirk on his face, sure that he had just taught a lesson to a vagrant drifter who didn't know his place. The man on the floor, handcuffed and silent, didn't scream. He didn't even flinch. He just looked up, his eyes cold, calculating, and terrifyingly calm. Halloway thought he was the predator, but in that split second, the entire room felt the temperature drop. They hadn't arrested a criminal. They had hunted a wolf. And when the phone rang, the hunting season was officially over. The dusty sign welcoming visitors to Oak Haven, Alabama, boasted of Southern hospitality and law and order. But for Marcus Sterling, driving his matte black Ford F-150 through the sweltering heat of a Tuesday afternoon, it felt more like a trap waiting to be sprung. Marcus wasn't looking for trouble. He rarely did these days. At 34, he carried the kind of silence that only men who have seen too much noise can afford. His knuckles, resting lightly on the steering wheel, were scarred. A map of violence he had left behind in places like Kandahar and the Horn of Africa. He was a Master Chief Special Warfare Operator, a Navy SEAL with Tier 1 clearance, currently on leave and driving cross-country to visit his sister in Florida. He wasn't in uniform. He wore a simple grey t-shirt, worn-out jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. To the untrained eye, he looked like a drifter. To a prejudiced eye, he looked like a target. Blue and red lights flashed in his rear-view mirror. Marcus sighed, the sound barely audible over the hum of the AC. He checked his speedometer. He was doing 45 in a 50 zone. His registration was current. His tags were clean. He pulled over to the gravel shoulder, the gravel crunching loudly under his heavy tires, and killed the engine. He rolled down the window and placed both hands on the top of the steering wheel, fingers spread. Textbook. Non-threatening. In the side mirror, he saw the officer approaching. The man was big, thick-necked, with a buzz cut that was trying too hard to look military, but lacked the discipline. His uniform was tight around the gut, his nameplate reading Halloway. His hand was already resting on the butt of his service weapon. "License and registration," Halloway barked, not even waiting to reach the window. He stopped 3 feet back, behind the B-pillar. Tactical positioning, but sloppy. "Good afternoon, officer," Marcus said, his voice a deep, steady baritone. "It's in the glove box. I'm going to reach for it now." "I didn't ask for a narration, boy. I asked for the damn ID." Marcus paused. The disrespect was sharp, practiced. He slowly reached over, opened the glove box and retrieved the leather wallet. He handed over his driver's license, a standard Florida civilian license. He kept his military ID tucked away. He didn't want to pull rank, unless he had to. He just wanted to get through Oak Haven. Halloway snatched the plastic card, squinting at it in the harsh sunlight. "Sterling. You a long way from Florida, Sterling. Just passing through, officer." "Passing through," Halloway mimicked, leaning down so his face was inches from Marcus's. The smell of stale coffee and chewing tobacco wafted into the cab. "You know why I pulled you over?" "I was doing 45, officer." "You swerved, crossed the center line. I suspect you're under the influence." It was a lie, a blatant, lazy lie. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, analyzing the threat. Halloway was looking for a fight. He was bored or angry or just hateful, and Marcus was the convenient outlet. "I haven't been drinking, officer. I'm happy to take a breathalyzer." Halloway chuckled, a wet, ugly sound. "Oh, we don't need that. I can smell it on you. Step out of the vehicle." "Officer, I said step out of the vehicle, now!" Halloway shouted, his hand snapping the retention strap on his holster. Marcus calculated the odds. He could disarm Halloway in less than 2 seconds. He could break the man's wrist, crush his windpipe, and be back on the road before the dispatch radio crackled. But that was the old life. That was the war. Here, on American soil, the rules of engagement were different. Here, he had to lose to win. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the door. He stepped out, towering over Holloway by 2 inches. The officer blinked, surprised by Marcus's size. The drifter was built like a tank, solid muscle coiled under the grey cotton. "Turn around, hands on the hood," Holloway commanded, shoving Marcus hard in the shoulder. Marcus didn't stumble. He absorbed the force like a stone wall absorbs a pebble. He placed his hands on the hot metal of the hood. "Spread 'em!" Holloway kicked Marcus's ankles apart, harder than necessary. He patted him down, his hands rough and invasive. He found nothing but a wallet and a folded piece of paper in his back pocket. "What's this?" Holloway grabbed the paper. "Personal correspondence," Marcus said. It was a letter from the Department of the Navy, specifically from Admiral Creighton, regarding his upcoming Medal of Honor ceremony. But Holloway didn't open it. He just crumpled it and shoved it into his own pocket. "You're under arrest for DUI, resisting arrest, and, let's say, disorderly conduct." Holloway grinned. "You looked at me wrong. I haven't resisted," Marcus stated calmly. "You are now." Holloway grabbed Marcus's wrist and wrenched it behind his back, slapping the cuffs on with agonizing tightness. "Welcome to Oak Haven. We don't like your kind causing trouble here." As Marcus was shoved into the back of the cramped cruiser, he caught a glimpse of Holloway's face in the rearview mirror. The officer was dialing his phone, grinning. "Yeah, Sheriff. Got a big one. Out-of-towner. Looks like he might have some cash on him, maybe drugs in the truck. Yeah, we're gonna have some fun with this one." Marcus leaned his head back against the cage. He closed his eyes and began the breathing exercises he had learned during Bud's training. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Holloway had no idea. He had just put handcuffs on a ghost. The holding cell in the Oak Haven County Courthouse smelled of bleach and despair. Marcus sat on the metal bench, his posture perfectly straight. He had been processed, printed, and stripped of his belt and shoelaces. They had taken his truck to the impound lot. They had taken his phone. He had requested his one phone call 3 times. 3 times the booking sergeant, a man named Miller who looked like he was related to Holloway, had laughed and said, "Phones down. Budget cuts." Marcus knew the game. Isolate the target. Break their spirit. Make them plead guilty just to make it stop. It was Wednesday morning when they finally dragged him out. He hadn't slept, but you couldn't tell. His eyes were clear, his face shaved. He'd used the cold water in the cell sink, and his demeanor was unshakably calm. This unsettled the deputies. Prisoners usually cried, begged, or screamed. Marcus just watched them. "Court's in session, Sterling," Holloway sneered, appearing at the cell door. He looked fresh, his uniform pressed, ready to perform for the judge. "Judge Reynolds is a stickler. You better show some respect." "I always respect the law," Marcus said softly, "when it's upheld." Holloway's face reddened. He jabbed his baton into Marcus's ribs. "Move!" The courtroom was smaller than Marcus expected. Wood-paneled walls, a flickering fluorescent light overhead, and a gallery half-filled with bored locals. At the defense table sat a young woman with frizzy hair and a stack of disorganized files, Sarah Jenkins, the public defender. She looked exhausted. "Mr. Sterling," she whispered as he sat down, handcuffed to the chair. "I'm Sarah. Look, I got the file 5 minutes ago. Holloway says you were swerving all over the road, drunk, and you took a swing at him." Marcus looked at her. "I don't drink, and if I had taken a swing at him, he wouldn't be walking." Sarah paused, looking at the man beside her. She had defended hundreds of drifters addicts and petty thieves. She knew when a client was lying. This man felt different. There was a gravity to him. "Okay," she said, straightening her papers. "But Judge Reynolds, he and Holloway go way back. Reynolds is up for re-election. He likes being tough on crime. They're going to push for maximum sentencing to set an example. If you plead guilty to the DUI, I can maybe get the resisting charge dropped. You'll do 6 months. I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do," Marcus said. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Reynolds swept in. He was a man in his 60s, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite, and not in a good way. He didn't look at the files. He looked at the clock. "Case number 4928, Reynolds droned. State versus Marcus Sterling. Charges: DUI, resisting arrest, assault on an officer. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. Reynolds peered over his spectacles at Marcus. "Not guilty. Officer Holloway's report is quite detailed, son. Says you were belligerent. Says you threatened him." "The report is a fabrication, Your Honor," Marcus spoke up. His voice carried to the back of the room without shouting. "I didn't ask you to speak." Reynolds slammed his gavel. "You will speak when spoken to." "I am speaking now," Marcus continued, undeterred. "I requested a breathalyzer. It was denied. I requested a blood test. Denied. I requested my phone call to legal counsel. Denied. This entire proceeding is a violation of my constitutional rights." The courtroom went silent. A drifter citing the Constitution? Holloway, standing by the witness stand, laughed nervously. "He's a sea lawyer, Judge. Probably picked up some fancy words in prison." "Approach the bench," Reynolds hissed. Sarah stood up, but Marcus remained seated, his eyes locked on Holloway. The officer was smirking again. He felt safe here. This was his kingdom. "Mr. Sterling," Reynolds said, leaning forward, his voice dripping with venom. "In this county, my word is the law. You think you can come into my town, drive drunk, attack my officers, and then lecture me on rights?" "I am a United States citizen," Marcus said, "and I serve the United States Navy. I demand to contact my commanding officer." "Navy?" Reynolds laughed. "You look like a bum. Stolen valor is a crime, too, you know. I should add that to the list." "Check my wallet," Marcus said. "The military ID is behind the license." Holloway froze. He hadn't checked behind the license. He had just assumed. Reynolds looked at Holloway. "Brock, you check his ID?" I saw his Florida license, Judge. He's lying, just trying to stall." "I don't have time for this," Reynolds snapped. "Bail is set at $50,000. Remand him to custody until trial." "Your Honor," Sarah protested, "that's excessive for a DUI. He assaulted an officer, and he's a flight risk," Reynolds yelled. "And if he speaks out of turn one more time, I'll hold him in contempt." Marcus looked at the flag standing in the corner of the room. The gold fringe caught the light. He had bled for that flag. He had watched friends die for that flag. And now, these men were using it as a shield for their corruption. The anger, cold and sharp, began to rise in his chest. But he pushed it down. He needed to be smart. "Officer Holloway," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. "You took a letter from my pocket, a letter from Admiral Creighton. Where is it?" Holloway paled. He remembered the crumpled paper. He had thrown it in the trash bin outside the station. "I don't know what you're talking about," Holloway lied. "You are under oath," Marcus said. "Shut up!" Holloway shouted, stepping away from the stand and moving toward the defense table. The bailiff didn't stop him. Reynolds didn't stop him. "You shut your mouth, boy, or I'll shut it for you." Holloway was towering over Marcus now, the veins in his neck bulging. Is that a threat, officer?" Marcus looked up, completely unfazed. That look, that complete lack of fear. It broke Holloway. He was used to fear. He needed fear. When he didn't get it, he panicked. Holloway drew back his leg. "No!" Sarah screamed. But it was too late. Holloway's heavy tactical boot slammed into Marcus's chest. The chair tipped backward. Marcus hit the floor hard, the handcuffs biting into his wrists, the wind knocked out of him. The courtroom gasped. Even the bored locals sat up. Holloway stood there, panting, realizing he had just kicked a handcuffed defendant in open court. Judge Reynolds looked shocked, but quickly recovered. The defendant lunged. I saw it. Officer Holloway was protecting the court." Marcus lay on the floor. He tasted blood. He could feel a bruised rib, maybe a hairline fracture. He took a deep breath. He rolled onto his side and looked up at Holloway. He didn't grimace. He smiled, a terrifying, predatory smile. "That," Marcus whispered, "was a mistake." The cell door slammed shut with a finality that vibrated through the concrete floor. Marcus lay on the thin, stained mattress, his breathing shallow. The kick to the ribs hadn't broken the bone. He knew the specific sharp, grinding pain of a break, but the bruising was deep, likely affecting the intercostal muscles. Every breath was a labor. Officer Holloway hadn't just kicked him. He had dragged him back down the hallway, laughing with 2 other deputies, making jokes about tripping and clumsy prisoners. They had stripped him of his dignity, or so they thought. But dignity wasn't something men like Holloway could take. Dignity was internal. An hour passed. The sun began to dip, casting long, barred shadows across the floor. Footsteps approached. Not the heavy, boot-stomping stride of Holloway, but the clicking of heels. "Deputy, let me in. I need to speak to my client regarding his plea," a female voice said. It was Sarah Jenkins. "5 minutes, Sarah, and don't pass him nothing," the guard grumbled. The keys rattled and the door swung open. Sarah stepped inside. She looked different than she had in the courtroom. The exhaustion was replaced by a nervous, frantic energy. Her hands were shaking as she clutched her briefcase. "Oh my God," she whispered, looking at the dark bruise already forming on Marcus's jaw where he had hit the floor. "Mr. Sterling, I don't know what to say. I've seen them be rough before, but that? In front of the judge? It's what they do when they think no one is watching," Marcus rasped, sitting up slowly. He winced, his hand going to his side. "Even when everyone is watching." "I'm going to file a motion," Sarah said, though she sounded unconvinced of her own words. "I'll report this to the state bar. I'll call the ACLU, but Reynolds, he knows everyone. The prosecutor, the mayor. It's a boys' club, Marcus. They're going to bury you. If you don't plead out, they'll keep you here for months before trial. You'll rot in this cell." Marcus looked at her. He saw a good person trapped in a bad system. She was young, idealistic, and completely out of her depth. "I'm not pleading, Sarah," Marcus said calmly. "And I'm not rotting here." "How can you be so calm?" she hissed, crouching down so the guard outside wouldn't hear. "They just assaulted you. You're facing felony charges." "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper that commanded absolute attention. "Do you have a phone?" Sarah blinked. Yes, but I'm not allowed to let you use it. If Holloway catches me, I don't need to use it. You do." Marcus leaned forward. The pain in his ribs flared, but his eyes were intense, burning with a cold fire. "You heard me mention Admiral Creighton in court." Holloway laughed. Reynolds laughed. "They think I'm a homeless vet making up stories." "Aren't you?" Sarah asked gently. "Marcus, it's okay if you are. PTSD is real. I can get you help. Listen to me." The authority in his voice stopped her cold. It wasn't the voice of a drifter. It was the voice of a man who had led teams into darkness and brought them back out. "My name is Master Chief Marcus Sterling, SEAL Team 6. I am currently on leave following a deployment in the Horn of Africa. The letter Holloway threw away was a notification for the Congressional Medal of Honor ceremony in D.C. next month." Sarah stared at him. The silence in the cell was deafening. She looked at his hands, scarred, lethal. She looked at his posture. She looked at the unwavering truth in his eyes. "If that's true," she whispered, her face paling. "If that's true, they just assaulted a highly decorated active duty service member." "They did," Marcus nodded, "and they are holding me without cause. They have stolen federal correspondence. They have violated my civil rights." He recited a number from memory. It was a Washington, D.C. area code. "Memorize this number, Sarah. Do not write it down. 202-555-0199. Extension 4. Ask for General Vance. Tell him Viper has been grounded in Oakhaven." "Viper," Sarah repeated, her heart pounding. "Just tell him that, and tell him about the kick." Sarah stood up. She felt dizzy. This was insanity. If he was lying, she was going to look like a fool calling the Pentagon. But if he was telling the truth— "Time's up!" the guard yelled, banging his baton on the bars. Sarah looked at Marcus one last time. "I hope you're real, Marcus. Make the call, Sarah. Burn it down." Sarah hurried out of the cell, clutching her briefcase to her chest like a shield. She didn't stop at the desk. She didn't look at the deputies snickering as she passed. She walked out of the courthouse, into the humid Alabama heat, and got into her beat-up Honda Civic. She drove 3 blocks away to a gas station parking lot. Her hands were trembling so hard she dropped her phone twice. She dialed the number. Ring. Ring. "Pentagon switchboard, secure line," a crisp, robotic voice answered. Sarah froze. It was real. I need to speak to General Vance," she stammered. "Extension 4. Authorization code?" I don't have one, but a man named Marcus Sterling told me to call. He said, Viper has been grounded." There was a pause, a silence that lasted 5 seconds, but felt like 5 years. "Hold the line, ma'am. Do not hang up. We are tracing your location for verification." Sarah's eyes widened. Tracing? Suddenly, a new voice came on the line. It was deep, gravelly, and radiated power. "This is General Vance. Who is this, and where is Master Chief Sterling?" "My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm a public defender in Oakhaven, Alabama. Marcus, Mr. Sterling is in the county jail. He's been arrested." "Arrested?" The general's voice dropped. It wasn't anger. It was something far more dangerous. "On what charges?" "DUI, resisting arrest, assault on an officer. But General, it's a lie. He wasn't drunk, and in court today, the arresting officer, he kicked Marcus while he was handcuffed on the floor. The judge saw it and did nothing." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It was the silence of a predator spotting prey. "Is he injured?" "He's bruised. He's in pain, but he's calm. Scary calm." "Yeah, he does that," Vance muttered. "Ms. Jenkins, listen to me very carefully. You are safe. You have done your country a service today. Go back to your office and wait. Do not go back to the jail. Do not speak to the sheriff." What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "We're coming to get him," Vance said, "and God help anyone standing in our way." The line went dead. Sheriff Buford T. Miller was a man who enjoyed the simple things in life: bourbon, college football, and being the absolute king of Oakhaven County. He sat in his office, feet up on the desk, laughing as Holloway recounted the events in the courtroom. "And then you kicked him?" Miller wheezed, wiping a tear from his eye. "Right in front of Reynolds?" "Damn straight, Sheriff," Holloway grinned, popping a peanut into his mouth. Should have seen him fold. Big tough guy, crumbled like a cookie. "Reynolds covered for me," said the guy, lunged. "We got him, boss. We're gonna charge him with assault. Keep him in here for 6 months. Maybe work him on the chain gang. Teach him some manners." "Good work, Brock," Miller nodded. "Out-of-towners need to know. This is our town." The clock on the wall ticked past 4 p.m. Outside, the sky was beginning to bruise with purple and orange. It was a peaceful evening, until the phone on the sheriff's desk rang. Not the main line, the private line, the one only the mayor and the governor had. Miller frowned, swinging his feet down. "Yeah? Sheriff Miller." "Sheriff!" a frantic voice spoke. It was the air traffic controller from the small county airstrip 5 miles out of town. "Sheriff, you got something going on today." "What?" "No. Why?" "Because I just got a priority override from the FAA. They just cleared a flight path for heavy transport. Military signatures. 3 Black Hawks and a C-130 Hercules are entering our airspace. They aren't responding to my hails. They just broadcasted a Priority 1 code." Miller felt a cold prickle on the back of his neck. Military? Probably just a training exercise, doing a flyover. "Sheriff, they aren't flying over," the controller shouted. "They're descending. They're landing on the highway. Route 9. "What?" Miller stood up. "That's 2 miles from the station." Before he could process it, the station door burst open. Deputy Cletus, a young kid who usually manned the front desk, ran in, his face white as a sheet. "Sheriff, look outside. You gotta look outside." Miller and Holloway walked to the window. Oak Haven was a quiet town. The loudest thing that usually happened was a truck backfiring. But now, a low, thrumming vibration was shaking the glass of the sheriff's office window. It grew louder, a rhythmic thump, thump, thump that rattled the coffee mugs on the desk. "Is that?" Holloway squinted. 3 black shapes roared over the rooftops of Main Street. They were low, insanely low. The downdraft kicked up dust and garbage from the gutters. The sound was deafening, a physical force that hammered against the building. Black Hawk helicopters, no markings except for the faint, grey numbers on the tail. They hovered over the courthouse square, their rotors chopping the air with violent precision. "What the hell is going on?" Holloway yelled over the noise. Suddenly, the phone on the desk rang again. Then, the dispatch radio. Then, the fax machine started whirring. "Sheriff!" the dispatcher screamed from the other room. "State troopers are calling. They say the highway is shut down. A convoy is coming in. They say they have federal jurisdiction." Miller grabbed his hat. "Everyone out front! Now! Bring the shotguns!" "Sheriff, maybe we shouldn't," Cletus stammered. "I said move." Miller, Holloway, and 4 other deputies spilled out onto the front steps of the sheriff's station. They leveled their shotguns and service pistols, unsure of what they were aiming at, but ready to defend their territory. The helicopters had pulled back, circling like vultures, but coming down Main Street was a sight that made Miller's blood turn to ice. It was a convoy, but not just any convoy. Leading the pack were 4 black SUVs with government plates, red and blue strobe lights flashing in the grills. Behind them was a massive armored troop carrier, and flanking them were 2 military Humvees with gunners in the turrets. Though the guns were pointed low, the threat was implicit. The convoy screeched to a halt right in front of the station. The lead SUV's door flew open before the wheels had even stopped rolling. A man stepped out. He was wearing a navy dress blue uniform, immaculate and sharp. The gold stripes on his sleeve went all the way up. An admiral. He was followed immediately by 6 men in full tactical gear, helmets, body armor, automatic rifles held at the low ready. They didn't have police patches. They had tridents, seals, Halloway's shotgun shook in his hands. "Sheriff, who are they?" "Put the guns down," Miller whispered, his voice cracking. "Put them down right now." The Admiral marched up the steps, ignoring the weapons pointed in his general direction. He stopped 3 feet from Miller. He was an older man, grey-haired, with a face that looked like it had been chiseled from granite and resentment. "I am Admiral Creighton," he barked. "Who is the commanding officer of this facility?" I am," Miller stammered, holstering his weapon. "Sheriff Buford Miller. Now look here, you can't just land choppers in my town and—" "Shut your mouth," Creighton said. It wasn't a shout, it was a command. "You are currently holding a Tier 1 asset of the United States government. Master Chief Marcus Sterling, you have 10 seconds to produce him, or I will authorize these men to dismantle this building brick by brick to find him." Halloway stepped forward, trying to regain some bravado. "Now hold on a minute. That man is a criminal. He assaulted an officer. He's being held for—" Creighton turned his gaze to Halloway. He looked at the nameplate. He looked at the poorly fitted uniform. He looked at the fear behind the arrogance. "Officer Halloway, I presume?" Creighton asked softly. "Yeah, that's me." "The one who kicks handcuffed men?" Halloway froze. How do you—" "We know everything," Creighton said. He turned to the tactical team leader behind him. "Lieutenant, secure the perimeter. No one leaves. I want federal warrants served on every computer and file cabinet in this building. If anyone resists, neutralize them." "Aye, sir," the lieutenant replied. The team moved with terrifying speed, sweeping past the stunned deputies and into the station. "Where is he?" Creighton demanded, stepping into Miller's personal space. Cell 4, Miller squeaked. "Back hallway." "Lead the way," Creighton ordered, "and pray he's in one piece. Because if he has so much as a scratch on him that wasn't there when he entered this county, your life as a free man is over." They marched through the station. The local deputies were pushed against the walls, disarmed and zip-tied by the SEAL team with efficient, silent movements. The power dynamic had shifted so violently that Miller felt like he was in a dream. They reached cell 4. Marcus was standing by the bars, leaning casually. He looked tired and his jaw was swollen, but he was upright. When he saw the Admiral, he straightened his posture, snapping to attention despite the pain in his ribs. "Master Chief," Creighton nodded, his eyes scanning Marcus for injuries. He saw the bruise. His jaw tightened. "Admiral," Marcus replied. "Sorry to interrupt your week, sir." "You didn't interrupt it, son. You made it interesting." Creighton turned to the deputy holding the keys, a trembling kid named Cletus. "Open it." Cletus fumbled with the keys, dropping them twice before finally unlocking the door. Marcus stepped out. He didn't look at the sheriff. He walked straight to Halloway, who was being held by 2 SEAL operators. Halloway looked small now. The bully had vanished, replaced by a terrified child realizing the consequences of his actions. "Officer Halloway," Marcus said quietly. I didn't know," Halloway whispered. "I didn't know who you were." "It shouldn't have mattered," Marcus said. "It shouldn't matter who I am. You took an oath. You disgraced it." Marcus turned to Creighton. "Sir, I request permission to retrieve my personal effects, specifically, a letter regarding the ceremony." "The letter he threw away?" Creighton asked, glaring at Halloway. "The same." "Tear the place apart," Creighton ordered his men. "Find it." As the station turned into a whirlwind of federal activity, the front doors opened again. A man in a sharp black suit walked in, carrying a briefcase. He looked like a shark in human skin. "Admiral," the suit said. "I'm with the JAG Corps. We just served the electronic warrant on the dashcam footage from Halloway's cruiser. It seems the system error they claimed erased the footage was easily bypassed by our tech team. Miller gasped. We deleted that. Not well enough? The lawyer smiled thinly. We have the audio. We have the video of the stop. No swerving. No resistance. Just Officer Holloway escalating a situation and falsifying an arrest. He turned to Miller and Holloway. Gentlemen, you are under arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, kidnapping, assault on a federal officer, and conspiracy. And since this involves a military asset, you will be processed in federal court, not your cozy county setup. Holloway's knees gave out. He slumped against the wall. Marcus watched them. He felt the ache in his ribs, but the pain was distant now. He looked at the Admiral. "Sir, there's one more thing," Marcus said. "The judge." Creighton smiled, a cold, hard expression. "Don't worry, Master Chief. We saved the best for last. Get in the SUV. We're going to the courthouse." Judge Reynolds sat high on his mahogany bench, feeling particularly satisfied. The air conditioning in the courtroom was humming, struggling against the Alabama humidity. But Reynolds felt cool. He had just sentenced a local mechanic to 90 days for unpaid parking tickets, a sentence that would conveniently force the mechanic to sell his shop to Reynolds's silent business partner for pennies on the dollar. This was how Oak Haven worked. It was a well-oiled machine of misery and profit, and Reynolds was the operator. He looked down at the docket. "Next case," he grunted. Sarah Jenkins sat at the defense table, her hands folded tight. She had returned to the courtroom as instructed, but she was terrifyingly alone. She hadn't heard from the general since the call. Had they abandoned her? Had Holloway found out? Every time the bailiff looked at her, she flinched. "State vs. Timothy Ruggles," the bailiff announced. "Wait," Reynolds interrupted, peering over his glasses. "Where is Officer Holloway? He's the witnessing officer for this one." The bailiff checked his radio. "Dispatch isn't answering, Your Honor. Probably out on a call. Maybe the Sterling guy caused more trouble." Reynolds chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. Probably fell down the stairs on his way to transport. Shame. Well, we'll proceed without— Boom! The double doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open. They were thrown wide with such force that one of them cracked against the plaster wall. Every head in the gallery turned. Judge Reynolds stood up, his face flushing with outrage. "Order! Order in this court! Who dares—" His voice died in his throat. Marching down the center aisle was not a lawyer, nor a local deputy. It was a phalanx of 6 Navy SEALs in full tactical rattle, rifles slung, helmets on, faces obscured by ballistic eyewear. They moved with a fluid, terrifying synchronization, clearing the aisle like a plow moving through snow. In the center of the formation walked Admiral Creighton, his dress blues stark against the tactical gear of his men. And beside him, walking freely, was Marcus Sterling. Marcus had cleaned up. He had washed the blood off his face in the station bathroom. He held his head high, his eyes locking instantly onto Reynolds. "What is the meaning of this?" Reynolds shrieked, banging his gavel. "Bailiff, arrest these men! This is a court of law!" The bailiff, an overweight man named Carl, looked at the SEALs. He looked at the automatic rifles. He looked at his own holstered taser. He slowly raised his hands and stepped away from the bench. "I ain't doing that, Judge." Admiral Creighton stopped at the bar, the wooden railing that separated the gallery from the legal proceedings. "Judge Jeremiah Reynolds." Creighton's voice boomed, filling the room without the need for a microphone. "I am Admiral Thomas Creighton, United States Navy. You are currently presiding over a criminal enterprise disguised as a court of justice." "You have no jurisdiction here," Reynolds spat, though his hands were shaking. "This is Oak Haven County. Get out before I hold you in contempt." "I don't think you understand the chain of command, Jeremiah," a smooth voice cut in. From behind the seals, the JAG lawyer, Commander Vance, no relation to the general but equally sharp, stepped forward. He placed a heavy black Pelican case on the defense table, next to a stunned Sarah Jenkins. "We are invoking the Patriot Act and the Uniform Code of Military Justice," Vance stated calmly, opening the case to reveal a high-tech projector and comms unit. "We have declared this courthouse a crime scene under federal jurisdiction due to the kidnapping and torture of a Tier 1 military asset." "Kidnapping?" Reynolds laughed nervously. "Mr. Sterling was arrested for DUI." "Was he?" Vance pressed a button. A large projection screen, hastily set up by 2 of the SEALs in seconds, flickered to life. The video was clear, high-definition dashcam footage. The courtroom watched in silence as the screen showed Marcus's truck driving perfectly within the lines. They watched Holloway pull him over. They heard the dialogue. No slurring, no stumbling. They saw Holloway escalate. They saw the letter being stolen. Then Vance clicked a new file. "And this," Vance said, his voice hardening, "is the security footage from inside this very courtroom 3 hours ago. The footage you ordered deleted, Judge." The screen changed. It showed the earlier hearing. It showed Marcus handcuffed. It showed Holloway's boot connecting with Marcus's ribs. And then it showed the most damning thing of all. It showed Judge Reynolds watching it happen. It showed him flinching, then settling back into his chair. It showed him saying, "Officer Holloway was protecting the court." The silence in the room was absolute. The locals in the gallery, people who had lived under Reynolds' thumb for decades, began to murmur. Then the murmurs turned into angry whispers. "You lied," Sarah Jenkins said, standing up. Her voice was strong now. "You saw him kick a handcuffed man, and you put it on the record as self-defense." Reynolds slumped into his chair. He looked small. The granite facade had crumbled into dust. I have friends in the Senate," Reynolds whispered weakly. "You can't touch me." Marcus stepped forward. He walked through the gate, past Sarah, and stood directly below the bench. He looked up at the man who had tried to ruin his life for sport. "Your friends aren't here," Marcus said softly. "But mine are." Admiral Creighton nodded to the team leader. "Lieutenant, secure the package." 2 SEALs moved up the steps to the bench. Reynolds scrambled backward, tripping over his robe, knocking his gavel to the floor. "Get your hands off me! I am a judge!" he screamed as they zip-tied his hands behind his back. "Not anymore," the lieutenant said. As they dragged Reynolds out of the courtroom, past the stunned onlookers, Marcus turned to the gallery. He saw fear in their eyes, fear of authority, fear of power. "It's over," Marcus told them. "The sheriff is in custody. Holloway is in custody. The judge is gone." He turned to Sarah Jenkins. She was crying, tears of relief streaming down her face. "You made the call," Marcus said, extending his hand. "You saved me." Sarah took his hand. It was warm and rough. "I think you saved us, Marcus. This whole town. We've been drowning." "Not anymore," Marcus repeated. But as the adrenaline faded, Marcus felt a nag of suspicion. He looked at the files Vance was packing up. He looked at the terrified face of the bailiff. "Admiral," Marcus said, turning to Creighton. "Why?" "Why what, son?" "Why did they do it? Holloway was a bully, sure. But Reynolds, he risked everything to fast-track my conviction. He wanted me in prison now. Why the rush?" Creighton frowned. "We assumed it was just prejudice and power-tripping." "No," Marcus shook his head. "Holloway said something on the road. He said, 'Looks like he might have cash.' And in the cell, the guard mentioned that they needed to fill quotas for the contract." Marcus looked at the JAG lawyer. "Who runs the prison here?" Vance checked his tablet. "It's a county jail, but wait. It's managed by a private subcontractor. a company called Sentinel Corrections and Logistics. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Sentinel. I know them. They operate in conflict zones. Mercenaries masquerading as security. Check the ownership, Marcus ordered. Vance tapped furiously. His eyes widened. Sentinel Corrections is a subsidiary of a holding company, Reynolds Land Trust. The courtroom went deadly silent again. The judge owns the prison company? Sarah gasped. He arrests people, Marcus realized, the pieces clicking together like the bolt of a rifle. He convicts them in his own court. He sentences them to his own prison, and then he charges the state for their housing, Vance finished. And he uses asset forfeiture laws to seize their cars, their cash, their homes to pay for legal fees. It's not a justice system, Marcus growled. It's a human trafficking ring. Admiral Creighton's face turned a dark shade of purple. They were going to sell a Navy SEAL for profit? They were going to try, Marcus said. He looked at the door where Reynolds had been dragged out. Admiral, we're not done. We have the head of the snake, but we need to burn down the nest. The sun had set over Oakhaven, but the town was brighter than it had been in years. Floodlights from military generators illuminated the town square. The locals, usually hiding in their homes by dark, were out on the streets, watching the federal agents dismantle the corruption that had choked them for a decade. But Marcus wasn't in the square. He was in the back of a black SUV, speeding down a dirt road 5 miles north of town, flanked by the SEAL convoy. Target is a warehouse complex on the edge of the county, Vance explained, pointing to a map on a tablet. According to Reynolds's seized laptop, this is the headquarters for Sentinel Corrections. It's where they process the high-value assets seized from prisoners. My truck, Marcus said. And likely millions in stolen property, Vance added. But Marcus, you're injured. You should be in the medevac. My ribs are bruised, Commander. My hands work fine, Marcus said, checking the chamber of the Sig Sauer P-286 the Admiral had returned to him. It was his personal sidearm, retrieved from the sheriff's safe. I'm seeing this through. The convoy killed their lights as they approached the compound. It was surrounded by a high chain-link fence, topped with razor wire. Security cameras were everywhere. Thermal shows 12 heat signatures inside. The team leader, a calm giant named Dutch, reported over the comms. Armed. Civilians mixed in. Looks like they're using prisoners as labor. Slave labor, Marcus muttered. In America. Rules of engagement? Dutch asked the Admiral. Hostile, Creighton replied. They are armed combatants involved in a federal kidnapping conspiracy. Drop them. The lead SUV rammed the gate. Crash. The metal groaned and snapped. The convoy poured into the yard. Federal agents, down! Get down! Gunfire erupted immediately. The Sentinel Guards, private mercenaries paid to protect the judge's stash, didn't surrender. They opened fire with automatic weapons from the loading dock. Marcus was out of the door before the vehicle stopped. He moved instinctually, the pain in his side forgotten, replaced by the flow state of combat. He rolled behind a stack of crates, double-tapping 2 rounds into the shoulder of a mercenary on the catwalk. The man screamed and dropped his rifle. Move up, flank left, Dutch yelled. The SEALs moved like water, efficient, lethal. The mercenaries were used to bullying prisoners and terrifying locals. They weren't ready for Tier 1 operators. Marcus advanced toward the main office door. A guard popped out, raising a shotgun. Marcus didn't hesitate. He sidestepped, grabbed the barrel, wrenched it down, and delivered a palm strike to the man's chin. The guard went down instantly. Marcus kicked the door open. Inside, the warehouse looked like a department store. Rows of luxury cars, motorcycles, stacks of electronics, jewelry, and safes. It was the loot of 1,000 illegal arrests. In the center of the room, a man was frantically shredding documents. He was slick, wearing a suit that cost more than Marcus's annual salary. "Don't move," Marcus ordered, leveling his weapon. The man froze. He looked at Marcus, then at the shredder. "You can't come in here. This is private property. Sentinel Corrections has a contract with the state." "Contract's terminated," Marcus said. He walked over and unplugged the shredder. He looked at the half-destroyed document in the man's hand. It was a ledger. Marcus pulled it free. He read the top line. Subject, Marcus Sterling. Asset value, Estor 40,000. Vehicle, 50,000. Cash bonds. Disposal method, indefinite incarceration. Reason, high risk, no family. "No family," Marcus read aloud. He looked at the man. "You thought I had no one fighting for me." We checked the databases," the man stammered, sweating profusely. "We look for drifters. People no one will miss. It's just business." "You picked the wrong drifter," Marcus said. Dutch and the rest of the team secured the room. Admiral Creighton walked in, looking around at the millions of dollars in stolen goods. "My God," Creighton whispered. "They've been doing this for years. Hundreds of victims." "Thousands," Sarah Jenkins said. She had insisted on coming, wearing a flak jacket over her court suit. She walked over to a filing cabinet and pulled out a drawer. "These are case files. People I defended. People I told to plead guilty because I thought there was no other way. They were innocent. All of them." She fell to her knees, sobbing. The weight of the guilt, the realization that she had been an unwitting pawn in this machine, crashed down on her. Marcus holstered his weapon. He walked over to Sarah and knelt beside her, ignoring the sharp stab of pain in his ribs. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Sarah, look at me." She looked up, her eyes red. "You didn't know," Marcus said firmly. "But when you did know, you acted. You made the call. You're the reason this stops today. You're not a pawn, Sarah. You're the hero of this story." Sarah wiped her eyes. She looked at the files. "I'm going to sue them," she whispered. "I'm going to sue them for every penny. I'm going to get every single one of these people out of jail." "And we'll help you," Admiral Creighton promised. "Navy JAG will assist with the exonerations. We don't leave people behind." Marcus stood up and walked to the back of the warehouse. There, under a tarp, was his Ford F-150. It was scratched, the interior searched, but it was there. He opened the door. The letter from the Admiral was gone, but something else was still under the seat, hidden in a compartment the mercenaries hadn't found. He pulled out a small, velvet box. He opened it. Inside was the Purple Heart he had earned in Afghanistan. He held it tight. They hadn't taken everything. "Chief," Dutch called out, "we found the servers. Encrypted, but we'll crack them. This goes up to the governor's office. Reynolds was funneling money to a pack." "Good," Marcus said. "Take them all down." He walked out of the warehouse into the night air. The flashing lights of the convoy were joined now by news vans. The story had broken. The world was watching Oakhaven. Marcus leaned against his truck. He was exhausted. His body hurt, but the air tasted cleaner than it had in days. Admiral Creighton joined him. "You okay, Marcus?" "I will be, sir." "You know, the ceremony is in 3 weeks. You think you'll be healed up enough to stand for the president?" Marcus looked at his bruised knuckles. "I've stood through worse, sir." "What are you going to do now?" Creighton asked. "We can fly you to Bethesda, get you checked out properly." Marcus looked at Sarah Jenkins, who was already on the phone with the press, organizing the release of the wrongfully imprisoned. "I think I'll stay here for a few days, sir," Marcus said. "I have a witness testimony to prepare, and I think I owe my lawyer a dinner." Creighton smiled. "Permission granted, Master Chief. Permission granted." The cleanup of Oakhaven took months, but the impact was instantaneous. The video of Holloway kicking Marcus went viral globally within hours, garnering millions of views and igniting a national firestorm. The Department of Justice didn't just investigate, they purged. Sheriff Miller, Officer Holloway, and Judge Reynolds stood trial 6 months later. This time, the courtroom looked very different. There were no friendly faces in the gallery, only stone-faced federal prosecutors and the families of their victims. Holloway wept openly as he was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Reynolds, stripped of his robes, his assets, and his dignity, received life without parole for running a criminal enterprise under the guise of the law. The irony wasn't lost on anyone when they were shipped off to a federal penitentiary, one that had absolutely no contracts with the Reynolds Land Trust. Sarah Jenkins became the district attorney in a landslide special election. Her first official act was to vacate over 500 wrongful convictions orchestrated by the Reynolds regime. She had found her voice, and she wasn't whispering anymore. She turned the corrupt courthouse into a beacon of actual justice. As for Master Chief Marcus Sterling, he stood tall in the East Room of the White House 3 weeks later. The president placed the Medal of Honor around his neck, citing his bravery overseas. But for the people of Oakhaven watching on TV, his greatest battle had been fought on their soil. He didn't stay in the spotlight, though. True to his nature, he packed his truck, shook Sarah's hand one last time, and drove off into the sunset. He was a quiet warrior, a guardian who appeared when needed and vanished when the work was done. But Oakhaven would never forget the Tuesday afternoon they tried to break a seal, only to find out they were the ones made of glass. What a roller coaster of justice! It's terrifying to think about how easily power can be abused when corrupt officials believe no one is watching. But it is infinitely satisfying to see what happens when the righteous finally fight back. Marcus Sterling proved that true strength isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about knowing exactly when to make the right call. He didn't just save himself, he saved an entire town. What would you have done if you were in Sarah's shoes? Would you have risked your career and safety to make that phone call to the Pentagon, or would you have played it safe? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and ultimate justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good payback story, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss our next drama. Thanks for watching.